You're about to get a crash course in PGA DFS on DraftKings and FanDuel. My name is Tyler Tamboline, aka Toe Tag and Tambo. I'm a daily fantasy sports pro who's won multiple six-figure weeks in PGA DFS, and I'm joined today by two of my buddies from Run Pure Sports. Bring them in here in a minute as we're going to share all of our secrets on how to win at PGA DFS. First off, BigT, Tony Niehaus. You guys may know him better as BigT 44 over on DraftKings and FanDuel. Winner of last year's Players Millionaire Maker for a cool $1 million. And just a couple weeks ago, picked up another $145,000 on DraftKings. And also my other buddy, Mike, no one does it better, Petta, Hoop 2410 over here at Run Pure Sports with us. Another guy just absolutely dominating in the PGA DFS streets, taking down the 555 multiple times and playing all different types of tournaments over there. So we're going to go into it here, guys. We've got a few segments. We're calling this series Trust the Process. We're going to bring to you all different aspects of the game, a little bit more generic strategy. But again, like I said, sharing our secrets on how we do so well within the game. So we'll get into it. Before we do, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps us out a ton here on the Run Pure Sports channel. The big red button in the bottom right corner to subscribe. Hoop, I'm going to start with you, my man. Mike, no one does it better, Petta, like I said before, bringing you in to start. You've had just a huge year so far in PGA. You've helped me a ton personally, just get better at it. But we're going to talk first off about some of the general strategy stuff and just general notes on things like scoring systems, difference between DraftKings and FanDuel. Talk to me about a little bit about your golf process in general, and then bring in some of those topics as we go through it.
Yeah, I mean, PGA was really a sport that I'd never really followed until I got into DFS. Probably, 8 years ago, started with PGA DFS, and it's probably become one of my favorite DFS sports. And honestly, I believe it's been one of my most profitable. I've had a lot of, really big wins, six-figure wins. It's just a unique DFS sport where, you get that 4-day sweat. It's just much different than the other sports. And over here at Run Pure Sports, it's become one of the products, one of the areas I think that we're most proud of, just a very strong team that we've built. So, in terms of comparing the two sites, FanDuel and DraftKings, pretty similar for PGA DFS. A couple minor things, like you get different points based on where the guys finish, placement points we call them. So if a guy finishes first, you get X amount. Slight differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. On FanDuel, you're also getting extra points for, I believe they call it a bounce back birdie, where if your guy has a bogey and then bounces back the next hole and gets a birdie, you get a small little bonus. But really, you're looking for the same sort of golfers on FanDuel and DraftKings. The prices are obviously a little different week to week. So that's where you can kind of say, okay, this guy might be a better play on FanDuel versus DraftKings because he's the 5th highest price guy on this site and he's the 10th highest on that site. So those are always some things you can look at if you're playing on both sports. In terms of like pros and cons, on DraftKings, they're more in on PGA. Their prize pools are much bigger. We have the milli makers for all the majors. Don't really have that on FanDuel, but on the other hand, not as many people, not as many pros are paying attention to FanDuel. So the competition could potentially be a little weaker over there. If you're looking for the big prize pools, DraftKings is your spot. FanDuel, like I said, not as many people are playing on their competition, could potentially be a little more weak. But the main thing about PGA DFS that makes it so unique, which I touched on in the opening, is the fact that you get these 4 days to really sweat out your lineups. And there's just no better feeling in DFS, honestly, knowing going into Sunday, you have a chance to win 6 figures, or in Big T's case, $1 million. I mean, Tambo, you and I have also had the sweats for $1 million. Haven't executed like Big T 44, but maybe we'll get there eventually. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a fun DFS sport and a big passion of a lot of guys over here at Run Pure.
Yeah, you said it best, man. I think a couple of things you brought up before I get to you there, Big T, just a matter of, like you said, the multi-day sweat. For those of you watching, you're probably out there, either you're already playing this and you want to get better, which is great, you're in the right spot. We're going to talk more on player exposures, roster construction, pool size, all of those things you most likely want to know about. We're going to get there. Again, crash course, breaking it all down, sharing our secrets. But for those of you that are maybe just wanting to get to know PGA DFS and checking it out, you usually play NFL, whatever it might be. To Hoop's point, you get a sweat on Friday. How many of your guys can get through and actually make the cut? And then you get to see what they do over the weekend. And hopefully you're in the running on Sunday to try and take down some of these big prize pools. couple quick notes on what Hoop mentioned there about FanDuel. Definitely think you should pay attention to it. I know some people don't, but like you said, because of that, it can be better. Also, there's pricing differences between the two sites, different salaries on either site. So there is things that you can look for and pinpoint that might be a bigger edge for you. A guy could be the stone minimum cheapest price on DraftKings and be like 3x that, or not 3x, sorry, like 3,000 more over on FanDuel just because of the way the pricing's set out, and you could sort of find your edge that way. But Tony, Big T, I'm going to bring you in, man. Huge year for you already this year. Like I said, just coming off 145K just 2 weeks ago. Wasn't that long ago. It was just we were celebrating the anniversary of you taking down the DraftKings Millionaire Maker. And we're getting into that season again here. That's why we're bringing the show out now. But how you doing? What are your thoughts on golf DFS in general? And then anything you want to add to what Hoop mentioned between sort of the two sites and general process stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys were saying. I've always loved golf, played golf in high school, played my whole life basically, and didn't play a ton of like fantasy golf type stuff till the last 4 or 5 years or whatever it is now. But it definitely is my favorite. And everyone always wants to say it's because of the Millie. That's not true entirely. Yeah, you win $1 million at something, it's going to make you like it for sure. But I loved it before that, even tons of big sweats, tons of big hits before that. It's just a great fantasy sport. And that's why it's growing more than any other sport in my, maybe not football, but everything else, it's growing as high or higher than those. The 4-day sweat, one of the best sweats in all of sports. I think everyone will like it. Even if you're not a huge golf fan, it'll make you like golf even more. It's just awesome. Like in baseball, obviously, you know, you want your guys to hit home runs, strikeouts. Football, you want touchdowns. Basketball, you want everything pretty much. But golf, it's just, you know what you're rooting on. You're rooting on your 6 guys. You pick 6 guys on both sites. And yeah, I mean, it's a great sweat. I love it. I'm excited to talk more about the process of it all.
Yeah, and I like what you said that last part. You know, I'm not going to take away from any other sport, but you mentioned like even in basketball, you need a lot of things to happen. Yeah. Of course, you're cheering for your guys, but you're not really sure till the last second that, okay, now I need this. In golf, it's like you said, you just need them to score. But if you're waiting on a Sam Burns birdie, or you need Davis Riley to bogey this hole, you know, shot per shot, almost like when in NFL, your quarterback gets into the red zone, please throw it to my guy. I just need this guy to catch a touchdown. You know exactly what you need. And I love that about the sweat down the stretch. And it definitely makes golf more exciting for those out there that maybe don't want to watch golf or aren't in tune with the rules, whatever it might be. This will change it very quickly. You'll adapt very fast. And now, you know, even my wife, I know your wife, Tony, she's been watching it, Hoop, I'm sure the same, where even the wives can get into it, because at the end of the day, you sort of figure it out. It just needs this to happen and we're good to go. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to give a real example about the Millie win, just because I think people like to hear about it. Yeah. It was on like the 13th or 14th hole at Sawgrass, where I was in first pretty much the whole week, but Bryson had been struggling a little bit early in the day. And I knew for sure if he could make one eagle, because I don't know the exact, I think it's 10 points for an eagle or something, whatever the exact is though, I knew I was basically going to win if he got an eagle, as long as he didn't blow up or something, obviously on the water holes coming in. But it's just such a sick sweat when he gets to 15 or 16. I forget the exact hole. Par 5, though, he kills his drive. And you just know if he hits that green, you're going to have an eagle putt basically for $1 million. And then he hits it on the green, knocks it in. I mean, it's just such a sick sweat. You're not going to get that in any other sport, even football. Your guys in the red zone, yeah, I guess there could be a time where, like, if your guy throws it, you know you're going to win. But in golf, you for sure know if he makes that putt, you're going to win $1 million. That's just a sick sweat, no matter how you draw it up. Yeah, you want to be on the winning side of that sweat, but it's a sick sweat on both ends, which we all love as gamblers and DFS players.
You don't get those sweats very often. I'm going to stick with you because it's a great segue. The next sort of segment we want to go into here is contest selection, and something to do with that definitely comes down to payout structures. You talked about it. We're a little bit more on the sicko side of things. I know Hoop, we'll get to cash first GPPs, and you've converted now and you're okay with it, obviously, but I'm just saying, funny enough, like this is just what I've always loved. I know Big T, you're the same. I don't care. $20 I can get in, 100, whatever it is, $1 million for first, 100,000 for second. They're fixing it a little bit. I saw this week coming up, you know, we're recording this at this time around the Masters 2022, but they're having tournaments now where it's $1 million and then like 250 or 200, and they'll drop it down depending on the millionaire maker that you're in. But Tony, let's talk about the contest selection just in general. Someone just starting off, low versus high dollar, the payout structures in general. What would you suggest they look for? What do you look for? And what do you think are some of the secrets that go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is just such an important topic for people coming into DFS because honestly, it's just what you want. Like, what do you value? Are you doing it for entertainment? Are you doing it to make money? Are you doing it just to like grind, be in the chat with people? Just there's tons of people that have different reasons for all this stuff, but it's a huge factor in what you want to do. Like, if you don't have a ton of money and you want to grind, you shouldn't be getting in these milli maker type things because of how much harder they are to ship with that many people in it, different reasons. But you just need to know what you want. I would say that to anyone, not just in golf, but any DFS sport. You have to know, like, if you want to grind, get in the low stakes, single entry stuff, or even cash where double ups and stuff like that, head to heads, where Hoop can talk more of that in a second because he knows better than me with it. But you got to know what you want more than anything. If you want to gamble, have fun, get in the milli makers. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if it's a bad payout, you still have a chance to hit $1 million off $15 or whatever it is that week. And yeah, most of the time you'll probably lose, but you just never know. You always have that chance. We've seen tons of people over the years, one entry, $1 million type stories. And everybody always wants to say you can't compete with the 150s. You can't do this. You can't do that. That's just not true. Yeah, in the short term, the 150s have a big edge over you and they have more of a chance, but they also have more of a chance to lose money where you can easily put one entry into the milli maker as long as you know what your goals and everything you're doing is all about. Because the odds, somebody's got 150 entries, you got one, but they can also lose that much more too. So you just have to know what you want. I think once you determine that, then it's easy to point you in the right direction with single entry stuff, big field stuff. Hoop's the master of 100 entry fields. I think Hoop's the best ever to play DFS at 100 man. It doesn't even have to be high stakes because truly it's just 100 man. Like if you were lower stakes, there's probably 100 man $5 tournaments that same exact strategy would be used. So again, nothing more important in contest selection than knowing what you personally want. What's your goals? Figure out your goals. And it could truly be just to have fun. Like, you could lose and you don't care. And that's fine. That's how I would be personally. If I had a different job and I was playing this and I was doing it for fun, I would be more of the gamble side and be fine with losing and then have a chance at the upside. So figure out what you want and go with it would be my advice.
Yeah, and we've got a lot going on over at Run Pure Sports to help you through that. And we're going to do a lot more in this video. This is sort of the intro portion. We're just getting into the basics. To clarify one thing, when Big T talks about the 150s, some of the strategy or what it would be in the MME tournaments, so that's mass multi-entry, I can enter 150 lineups max. That's the most I can put in. But there are many out there, like myself included, that do max out these tournaments. And we're playing to sort of leverage up the field. When we get into player pools, exposures, roster construction, things like that a little bit later in the show, we'll talk more on that. But to Big T's point, there's nothing saying you can't go into a tournament with one lineup and end up beating all 150 of mine. It can still happen. It changes over the term. And again, depends on your goals, strategies, and how you play the game. Hopefully that helps you guys. Hoop, any thoughts on the same stuff there? We'll get into cash versus GPPs in a second, but just talk a little bit on sort of contest selection, your strategy when it comes to that, what your process is, and then we'll get into cash versus GPP.
Yeah, I mean, the most important part about this section here is determining, what you're looking for when you're entering a contest. And if you're someone that's, new to DFS and you're trying to build up a bankroll, the last place you should be clicking is on these milli maker contests, because you're not going to build your bankroll by playing in the milli maker unless you win first place. When obviously that changes things a little bit, but overall, like, you don't necessarily want to build your bankroll in those sort of contests. You want to look at things with flatter payouts, and by flatter payouts, I mean, in the milli maker, it's $1 million to first, 100,000 to second. That's a $900,000 drop. You're going to look for contests where, okay, maybe it's 10,000 for first, 7,500 for second, $5,000 for third. So you're looking for more flatter payout structures when you're trying to build up your bankroll. Now, if you have a full-time job and you just want something for fun and you have a allocated amount of funds that you're willing to just lose, yeah, put it in the milli maker and have some fun with it and get unique with the way you build your lineup. We'll talk about that as well moving forward. Different ways you can build your lineups to kind of coincide with the contest that you've entered on a given slate. So a lot of it is honestly, like Tony said, like what are you looking for when you're entering DFS contests? If you're looking to build that bankroll, don't play those milli makers, play other contests. If you're looking to just have some fun and, do it for entertainment and hope you have a good team, yeah, jam it right in that milli maker and move on. So it all comes down to really what you're looking for. So I think you guys kind of summed that up perfectly.
Yeah. One last thing, just to add on, I agree with you 100%, but just like the field size matters as well. At the hoops point, like looking for those flatter payout structures, a lot of times the more money you put in, it ends up being the smaller field because less people want to put in $555. That field size might only be 1,250 entrants versus the $15 that Big T mentioned might be 70,000 entrants, for example. So that's where you're looking to find your angle. Obviously, the less people you play against, you should have better odds regardless, but then you still want to look for things. And just a note here, I think it's a good time to mention, if you didn't subscribe yet, big red button, bottom right corner, do that. We have a free show every Tuesday. Hoops on it with our guys, AP, Snyder. We have different guests at other times, but they go through and talk about this stuff and some of the strategy. And then, of course, you can get the premium content over at Run Pure Sports as well, where we go through and have like the Wednesday final show with last minute exposures. We have our cores, our tiers. That will be more when we talk about player pools. But Hoop, I'm going to kick it back to you because you play everything now. I know you do because I watch every week. And normally it's at the top of the leaderboards, but the 555s, the 3Ks, the $20, the large fields, the small fields, whatever it might be. But I know your background in all sports. You're someone who's been in the lobbies for a long time and stayed in those lobbies, didn't disappear like some of the others out there, which is nice to see. But what's been your transition from cash to GPPs to every different field size and buy-in? Like, what's your thoughts on all of that stuff?
Yeah, so like cash games, I always, played cash games when I first started playing DFS in every sport. And by cash games, we're talking head-to-heads, 50-50s, double ups, and, some people kind of consider triple ups in that category as well. I mean, really, if you have a good week in cash games, you're essentially doubling your money. So if you play for $200, you're hoping to take that 200 and turn it into 400, minus the site fees and stuff. So maybe take 200 and turn it into 180. So really you're capping your upside. When you play these GPPs, you have the chance to take hundreds of dollars and turn them into hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we've seen many of our members at Run Pure Sports do, especially in PGA DFS. A lot of success for members. I mean, we've seen some crazy screenshots where guys play for like $20 and they've won $150,000. So a lot of success by our members. But cash games, you're essentially looking to double up your money. GPPs, you're really looking to take that money and turn it into something big. Now, when it's all said and done, it's a risk balance. So, what do you want? What are you looking for? You're probably more likely to win cash games versus the GPPs, just because less people are cashing in those GPPs. Maybe 20% of the field cashes in a GPP. If you're playing a 50-50 or double up, half the field is going to double up their money essentially. So for me personally, I've kind of made that transition more to GPPs, especially in PGA DFS. Those top those prize pools with hundreds of thousands of dollars and $1 million are very very appealing. So the way you build your teams are obviously different as well. If you're playing a head-to-head or a 50-50 or a double up, you're looking for guys that essentially are just going to make the cut. You want all your guys to get through. There are a lot of guys in PGA that we see, they'll make the cut most weeks, but they'll finish 40th or 50th. In cash games, that might be good enough. In GPPs, you really need to look to guys that can get to that next level and win. And the best example I can think of for a PGA guy would be like Brooks Koepka. Outside of the majors, obviously, because majors, it's a different story with Brooks, but Brooks is a guy with very peak type results. Like if he makes the cut, he's going to probably finish, tie for 15th or better. But a lot of times he misses the cut. That's perfect for GPPs. You want that volatility in GPPs where a guy either going to miss the cut or probably be in contention to win the tournament. And in terms of the guys that just make the cut and finish T40, there's a lot of those guys. And a lot of times they're really like the cheaper price guys on DraftKings where they make a lot of cuts, but they just don't have those top end finishes, which is fine for cash games because you just want to make sure you get your guys through all 4 rounds, rack up the points throughout the weekend. But in GPPs, we're really searching for those guys that can get to the top of the leaderboard and win the event.
Yeah, I love the volatility word that you mentioned there because that's so true, right? In cash games, as you talked about, the head-to-heads, the double-ups, the 50-50s, even triple-ups and stuff you could classify in there where you don't have to beat up the whole field and win. You just have to beat that 50% or 33% of the field in those examples. That way you could have a 4 out of 6 lineup where 4 of your guys make it through the cut, 2 of them don't. That's considered the 4 of 6. And as long as you, let's say, have the winner or one guy that does really well, you could actually still end up cashing on the week because other people have guys that miss cuts as well. Versus in GPPs, and just to clarify, guys, that's guaranteed prize pools. So the tournaments like the Millie Maker is a $2 million GPP, guaranteed prize pool of 2 million, where they're allocating $1 million to first place and then divvying out a diluted payout structure from there, like 100,000 to second, 40,000 to third, et cetera, and all the way down to what would be the minimum payout, usually around 20%, give or take, of the field gets paid some sort of cash back. But in those, someone is going to play and go with the more volatile strategy, like you mentioned, Hoop, and pick 2 others that will make the cut, and they will have a 6 out of 6 with the same winner you have. And you're just going to have to be able to beat that. So you do have to be willing to take on a little bit more risk in those. Big T, kick it over to you with the same question, just not cash versus GPP, but maybe a little bit on lineup construction differences in tournaments, that because you play tournaments strictly, that you would expect to be different than those that are playing like a double up, for example.
Yeah, I just think it depends more of the same as the last topic we were on, where you just have to figure out what you want. If you're in a 100-man field, no matter what it is, you're going to be able to not have to take as many chances as you would in like a Millie Maker. In a Millie Maker with a huge field, 100,000, 200,000 people in it, it can get up to sometimes. You just have to take a more aggressive approach with not the whole team. This is one mistake I think a lot of people make, where they think their whole team has to be crazy. You could even play 4 really popular players from that week, 5 maybe even sometimes. You need 1 or 2 guys that are lower owned or a different roster construction like Tambo talks about on a lot of our premium shows, where you don't want, if you're in a huge Millie Maker, you don't want to just play all the obvious teams that you would put in a cash format or a smaller field single entry type format. So you just have, it's just the same type thing. You have to know your goals. You have to know how to construct per team, per tournament. And I think we do a good job at Run Pure Sports of kind of pointing you guys in the right direction. We got great cash people there. We got great tournament people there, full staff too. Someone's always in Discord talking to the people. And it's just more of the same though. You have to know what you're trying to do. And I think we do a good job of helping people approach that topic.
Yeah. So here's where the secrets start, because I'm going to stick with you, Big T, because that's kind of the key. You just mentioned it, right? When it comes down to it, you'll have to take your own stand or pick your own strategy. But even myself, I'm always looking to get better, always trying to learn. Like those of you out there that are watching this video, I think I played a lot of guys, right? Before I came over to Run Pure Sports, I played more guys in the field. And I'll talk a little bit on that in a second, just my own take on narrowing the player pool, because I think there is certain weeks, and I'll go into it, where you could play more guys than normal. But I think you've got a good piece on this, Big T, just around how you go about narrowing your player pool versus what some out there do in the industry. It's not saying they're wrong. It's just saying it seems like they don't win as often as what we got going on over here. I did mention as we recorded the video, but it was like our guy AP won the $200 single entry for 50K. The follow-up week, Hoop won the 555 for 100K. He's right here. The next week, I won almost $100,000 at the Valspar. And then the week after that, Big T, you go and win 145,000, as we mentioned previous. And I think a lot of it comes down to our player pools and the size of our player pools. So talk a little bit about that and let the people know what you do there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the edges we have for sure at Run Pure, where we're just limiting, we're okay to the variance. And I will say the flip side too, as I go into it, there's a lot of sharp people around the industry that play like 100 people of the 140 that are in the field most weeks. And I don't think that's the right approach at Run Pure. I don't think any of us really consider that the right approach. I just want to throw it out there that there is sharp people on the other side, which kind of makes it fun and makes me think that our edge is this big in golf because of that. I think it's the type of thing where a few years from now, hopefully a few years from now, people are like, man, why were we playing so many guys? And then they adjust, because eventually I do think people will adjust and play less people. So now I'll say the two sides of this though. So most weeks I'm cutting my player pool somewhere around 30. I mean, maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more. 30 is my key number though, where I want to be around 30 total golfers in my player pool for 150 teams. Obviously, if you're playing 20 teams or 3 teams or 10 teams, your numbers will be a little bit different, but the point still stands the same: to take stands on your guys. And yeah, the weeks you hit your takes, you want to win big in your tournaments. That's my goal, and it should be anyone's goal playing tournaments. When your main core guys do well, you should win a lot of money or all the money. Flip side to that is when you're wrong and you take stands and you don't get it right, you're probably going to lose more than the people that play 100 guys per week. Definitely a more variance approach, but also one I really agree on when you're playing tournaments, because you're not basing your year on the week. You're basing your year on the year, all the tournaments. So if you hit 1 week, like I was lucky enough to 2 weeks ago for 145K or whatever it was, that pays for, I mean, I'm averaging somewhere around like 6 to 15K per week. So you're talking, I don't know, 10 to 15 weeks were paid for with the one hit. And that's not even counting all the min cashes and stuff. So again, the key point that I keep harping on: know your goals. If you don't care about variance, I think our approach is very good. And in the long run, you're going to have the big weeks should pay for the bad weeks. You can't go into it just thinking you're going to win every week, though, when you play a limited amount of players, because unfortunately, it could be you even hit your guys right. Like last year at the Masters, I did decent, but I didn't have Hideki as much. So if you don't have the winner, you're not going to ship most weeks. And that's okay with me, though, because the weeks that I do hit, like a few weeks ago when I had the big hit, I had Scheffler like 70% owned, and he was like 10% in the tournament. So if the guy wins the tournament and you're way above the field, we always use the 2 number, 2x the ownership. So if you think a guy's 20, we want to be up to 40. But if I like a guy even more like Scotty that week, I could get 70 is like my max number. I'm okay going 1 or 2 guys between 50 and 70. My key numbers, though, is usually going to be like 30% of a lot of guys, to where almost always, if you play 30% of a golfer, you're going to be 2 times the field or more for the most part. Obviously, there's some chalky guys where that changes. But point being, we take stands. We want to go above the field on a lot of the guys. We also want to take hard stands on fades, where a fade could be even a really good play. Like some weeks, some of the best players in the field could be a fade, in my opinion, even though they're the best play in the field, just because of ownership. If a guy's 30% owned and he misses the cut and you somehow faded him, you have a massive, massive leg up on the field. So that's more, as we get into strategy on some of the shows, we can get into more of that, but that's the basic breakdown from my perspective.
Yeah, I think a couple of the secrets that came out of it. The first one's bankroll management. The 3 of us sitting here right now have played this game for a long time, not just PGA DFS, but you have to put your money that you're putting in play, be able to lose it. And that's the second secret, is knowing that in PGA DFS, in a lot of DFS sports, you're going to lose a lot more days than you're going to win. It's about how much you win on the days you get things right. And that's what taking the stands does in PGA DFS specifically. Yes, it sucks to say, like, I know this guy's a great play, that's why he's 30% owned, I feel like I'm going to miss out. But what ends up happening is that's why that person, that potential golfer, just keeps getting more ownership, because everyone has to throw their sprinkle on him. And that's how their player pools get divvied out too, because now they have 10% of this guy, 20% of that guy, 5% of him. Like, all of these factors. The one time, and I'll go to you in a sec, Hoop, that I do think it's okay. Like an example was, again, last week, the time we're recording this is close to the Masters 2022. But just to say that, like, if you were playing like wave stacks, and a wave stack in PGA is where you can try and find an advantage or an edge, talks a little bit about, fine crafting your player pool, where you would play guys that start in the morning and then show up in the afternoon, or vice versa. You play guys that start in the afternoon and then play the next morning to try and gain an edge on maybe something like weather. That's where I'm okay with the pool, because if I'm playing 35 guys from this side of the pool and 35 from that, yes, I have a 70-man pool, but my strategy is diversified to be that if that wave gets through, half of my lineups, if I divvied up that percentage, is on a path to beat all those guys. And that's how sometimes you can end up just naturally fading a guy like a 35% owned guy that everyone else couldn't fade. You had to fade them in those wave lineups because they weren't in that wave. Hoop, I'll go to you. Any specific strategies when it comes to setting up your player pools, and maybe beyond what, Big T and I just talked about, like some of the stuff about how you go about fine tuning your player pools each week?
Yeah, I mean, PGA is one of the DFS sports where BigT and myself think a lot alike. Other sports, we have different strategies, but this one we align pretty closely. And what he said is just the truth. I mean, you have to make your stands. I mean, you can't play every guy in the field. You're going to lose to the rake. You're going to lose to the site fees over the long term. You can't beat this game by just playing everyone. And you listen around the industry, people will say, "Oh, I want to get a sprinkle of him. I want to get a sprinkle of this guy or that guy." That just means they're playing everybody, and that's not what we do here at Run Pure Sports. And we kind of take the work out for you. If you're someone that has like a full-time job and you don't have time to go through 144 golfers and figure out who you want to play and who you want to fade, we have resources on our website that help you do that. We have a playbook which breaks down all our favorite guys. We have a list of the guys that we're going to fade. We have a lot of our coordinators listing their core plays, guys that are going to be in their lineups. BigT has his player pool, his entire player pool right on the website on a separate piece of content. So we have all the resources you need to make these decisions for you. But the most important part is that you're doing that in your lineups. If you're not making the hard cuts, there's sometimes, I mean, the top 20 golfers in the world, any of them could go out and win an event any given week. And it's uncomfortable to fade them or not play them in your lineups, but you have to make some cuts. It's the most important part about PGA DFS. And like I said, sometimes it's uncomfortable. And then it does lead to the opposite side, where if you're 30% on a guy or 40% on a guy or a couple guys and they miss the cut, you're done for the week. But that's what DFS is all about. You can bounce back the next week and do it again over the long haul. If you make these cuts, if you get on a good core that ends up doing well, if you have 3 core golfers, they all finish in the top 10, probably going to have a really good week in DFS. And by limiting the number of players in your player pool, that's not going to get you to a min cash. That's going to get you to the top of the leaderboards that given week. It's the reason it's just so important to really, limit your player pools. Tony mentioned the 30 number. It kind of differs for me week to week. It depends. Like this week is the Masters. There's only 90 golfers in this field, and most of them will make the cut. There's a lot of guys that don't really have much of a chance of making a cut. So that's going to alter how I go about composing my player pool this week. If we're in a full field, 156 golfer event, might play a couple more guys. But the most important part is making some stands and really coming up with a tight player pool each and every week.
Yeah, and a couple of things you said, I'll just finalize out this topic, is just, the point of the 30%. It doesn't have to be that number, but the point of the smaller player pool is when these guys get there, when we do have our good week, and you never know when that's going to be. Maybe you have a bad last couple of weeks, but your good week is at the Masters where there's $1 million on the line, and that's the week you want to have it. So you can't always line those things up. You'll take what you get, but the point would be more when people are spacing it out, they only have 2% of this guy and 3% of that guy. They might find that diamond in the rough. Richard Bland of the week, 49-year-old journeyman trying to battle his way back in, but now they only have 2% of their entire lineups that they need the other 5 pieces to go right with it. When we have these smaller 30 to 40 man player pools and you've got minimum 15 to 20% of a guy, if he's having a good week and your others do too, you've got a lot more lineups circling and just hovering around the top of that leaderboard. It's not just the one bullet approach where I need this one lineup at a 150 and I need all 6 of these things to go right on Saturday and on Sunday, and maybe I'll get to the top. That's the absolute worst feeling. And that's why those people will end up getting a lot more money back over time each week to week. But when will they actually have the big payoff? Or will they? Because they're never really setting themselves up, in our opinions, to be able to putting themselves in that spot each week. So I like that strategy as well. We'll move on from there. I am going to stay with you though, Hoop, because I know you love to talk about this topic. I think it's another thing. I don't know if we'll call it a secret, but it's one of the most overplayed things in PGA DFS. Like, and we're going to talk about ownership, of course. And those that you play it and are trying to learn more here today know what we're talking about. But the can't play this guy. He's going to be 18% this week, and meaning 18% owned within the entire tournament. But if he was 9%, I'd play him, or he's 12%. If he was 9, I'd play him. We have all these topics that come up. Talk to me a little bit about ownership and just things regarding ownership in general.
Yeah, ownership is obviously a big talking point. If you listen to any PGA DFS podcast or show, the word ownership is going to be brought up. And, it's not necessarily ownership, it's what you do with that that term or that number. Each guy is going to have a projected type ownership, which we have at Run Pure Sports as well. It's not necessarily what that number is. It's how you interpret it. A lot of people in the industry are going to say, okay, this guy is going to be 15 to 20% owned this week. I can't play him now, no matter what. So for me personally, I view that differently. I'll never fade a guy because of quote unquote ownership. I just refuse to do that. If I like a guy, I'm playing him. I don't care what his ownership is. Now, what you do in terms of building your lineups should change. Now, if a guy's going to be 20% owned, which is relatively high for PGA DFS, and you really like that guy, for me personally, I would never play him at just 20%. I would make sure to get over the field, get over that 20% number. Whatever you think is good enough, 30%, 40%, 50%. Like Tony said, he'll sometimes go up to 60%. I'll do the same. So when you look at the term ownership, when you look at a guy's ownership, to me, it's more important with what you do with that number opposed to what that number actually is. And I think a lot of us here at Run Pure Sports have that mindset. Now, it varies, I guess, person to person, golfer to golfer, all that stuff. But if there's a guy that's going to be super highly owned, okay, let's say someone's going to be 28% owned, and I don't necessarily feel very good about that guy, that's when I consider fading a guy. Is someone I don't have a strong stance on, they're going to be highly owned. Maybe I just fade him at that point. Not every week. It varies week to week. But to me, the most important part about ownership is taking that number, and if you like a guy, making sure you get over the field. And by over the field, I mean, okay, this guy's going to be 15%. I'm going to play him 30%. I'm going to play him 35%. It's a stance I've always made in PGA DFS. If I like a guy, I am not fading because of ownership. And that's different from a lot of people. Like I said, you listen to a lot of PGA DFS content, they're going to say, okay, this guy's 15% owned, I'm going to fade him. To me, I would never do that. Now, I know a topic that we've talked about a lot on the shows, and Big T has an opinion on. I want him to touch on it because I think it is very important. Some of these cheaper guys, the more volatile guys, if they start to get some ownership, I know, Tony's talked about it a ton, where the very cheap guys at high ownership might not be the worst idea to go ahead and fade those guys, because there is way more volatility in the cheaper guys, the guys that are 200 to 1 to win the event versus the guys at the top, like, John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, these guys that the results are more consistent week to week. So I think it's a good point that we can kind of touch on here on the show, talking about the cheaper guys at a 10 to 15% ownership.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. I'm going to go to Big T on that exact topic in a second, because I know he has a strong take on it. I agree with him perfectly. But first off, I'm with you. I don't just fade a guy because of ownership. I might fade a guy because his ownership is this, and the guy right next to him has almost no ownership and similar odds in the betting market. Maybe that's a reason that I do it, but it gets taken as, oh, you can't play him because he's owned. No, I'm fading him because he's owned and because of this with it. That's one key point. But I think the secret to what you said is leverage. And that's where it gets misconstrued, because I can't play this guy because he's 15%, but I love him. Well, if you love him, you don't play him at 15%, play him at 30, or play him in more lineups so that you're getting what you want of a guy. And if he comes through, you're good. But Big T will talk about this. I think it matters more. And you mentioned a little bit who at the top, winners can win, like we do at Run Pure Sports. You could have any of these guys could come up and win this week. It's oftentimes with these cheaper 7K guys or 6K guys where people are almost putting them in as a slam dunk play of the week. And we know that's just not true. Big T, I'll bring you in to get your thoughts on ownership in general. And then especially when it comes to those value plays that are getting somewhat quote unquote over-owned, if you will.
Yeah, I think you guys broke it down very well. I mean, the top guys, the good thing about PGA, almost always these top guys are somewhere between like 15 and 25%, which they should be because they're the top players. I mean, we can argue who's the top 10 or 15 guys, but they can all win basically every time they tee it up. They're clearly better than the next guys. They're more consistent. They have a better chance of winning, obviously. And so, I mean, that part's easy. The only time it gets a little different at the top is if like you knew for sure someone, like we saw with Koepka a few times where you knew he was going to be like 2 or 3%. No one was going to play him. And then I think you can get leverage on those guys too a little bit, even though I don't play Koepka. But the main topic you guys were saying, yeah, the cheaper guys, where I agree completely with how Hoop said it, where if I love a guy, I don't care what he's owned. I'm going to just go above the field. I'm going to jam him in there, play him as much. Where I get a little different is if I don't love a guy and he's getting a ton of ownership, that's when I almost always fade, because like Tambo was saying, just say somebody was 15% or something, one of the cheaper guys. You can look at the win odds and the matchups and all that stuff, which we use to make a lot of decisions at Run Pure. And there'll be guys in the same price range with the same win odds or similar win odds. I mean, if one guy's 70 and one guy's 80, and the popular guy's minus 130 in the matchup or something, which is a tiny favorite in the big scheme of things. And all of a sudden the other guys are like 3% owned and this guy's 15 to 20% owned. They're basically the same play over the long run, and people just don't take advantage of that enough. Yeah, that guy probably is the best play in that range, but is he 5 times better than the other guy? There's just no chance he is. And in the long run, I just think you're getting a very big edge. Flip side to that is what Hoop said, though. If you like him still just go and play him above the field, because another reason I think we all three love golf so much, it's not like NBA where you'll have a guy 80% owned some nights when he's a great play. PGA, I mean, at the absolute highest, you're getting to the 30s for the most part. Maybe in high stakes, it goes a little higher sometimes, but 30% owned still isn't that high if you love a guy. I don't care who it is. It could be a cheap guy even. If I love him and he's that high and I still love him, I'll just go and, I mean, who knows? Maybe I just click the lock or 70%, put him way up there. So I think you just, like always, I think we do a good job at Run Pure of helping you make these decisions where we talk it through. We talk through the 7K guy who's very popular. Maybe that makes you want to go over on him. Maybe by reading it all, it makes you go under. And we have different opinions, which is good at Run Pure because you're getting more sides of the coin to make your own decisions, which you should be doing anyways in any fantasy sport, not even just talking golf. We put the content out. We do the shows and the articles and the playbooks and the course, but you're the ones that have to make the decisions and go with it. So I think we do a good job of helping you make those decisions at Run Pure for sure.
Absolutely. And like you said, we've got it there. Hoop mentioned earlier, but the core plays, the tiers, the playbook, it's all right there for you basically to be able to put together your lineups, even if you don't have the time. And if you have questions and you're unsure on something, pop into the Discord and ask. Hoop, Big T, myself, AP Snyder, Coop, all these other guys that we have in there are going to be there to help answer your questions. Uncle T, everybody that's there is able to help you guys out. So definitely check us out for that. Big T, I'm going to stick with you for the final topic because this has been, I'll call it a secret. Damn, it's a strategy piece that you've done for everything. It's your strategy is how well you use an optimizer. And for MMEing, like we talked about earlier, the mass multi-entry and those 150 entries, or just for even using it to see what others are doing and then adapt your strategy towards that. Talk to me about an optimizer. We have a good program going over here at Run Pure Sports with SaberSim, of course. That's been able to help us find some of these winners as well. But talk to me about just using an optimizer in general, and then how it's not just a tool to go click a button and make the lineups, but how you can use it to your advantage and sort of mess around with it to get it to do what you want it to do.
I think I'm a good person to talk about this topic too, because honestly, at my core, deep in my core, I'm a 1 to 3 lineup guy. People don't believe that anymore because I've had big success with the optimizer. But me personally, at my core, I think I'm best with 1 to 3 teams. I really do. But that being said, like Tambo said earlier in the show, you can't stay stagnant no matter what you do. Hoop went from mainly cash to a lot of tournaments now. He's learning and growing. Tambo's learning and growing. If you're not learning, I don't care who you are. Hoop's made as much money as anyone playing DFS. He's still learning. If you're not learning in any profession, you're just doing it wrong, or you're overvaluing what you do. I don't care who you are. Could be literally anyone watching this. So you need to learn. And that I tried to get better using an optimizer. At first, I wasn't good. I wasn't comfortable doing this stuff. And for those of you that don't even know what an optimizer is, all it is basically is giving you the option to put 150 teams in any tournament in a timely manner with your projections that you trust, no matter where you get them from. Obviously, you can monitor them. But it's just giving you so many options that you wouldn't have without a site like SaberSim to run the sims for you, to put your projections in, all the great stuff they give us. And over the years, really just the last 2 years, I've gotten way more comfortable. And I can tell you for a fact that I don't know how many exact 100K hits I've had in the last 2 years, but definitely double digits. I bet there's 6 or 7 of them that I hit only because I started using an optimizer. I would never have had, including the Millie Maker team, I would not have had that Millie Maker team hand building. I left 900 on the table, which I think is a fair number in golf. We're not going to get in that today, but how much can I leave salary is a question we get a lot. I think 900 is kind of my limit most events. And I left 900 on the Millie Maker team, which I never would have done that build without an optimizer. So I can say how much it's helped me. And the more, no one's going to be comfortable with it. I have friends still that I try to get to use it that are just like intimidated by it. Like, I can't do it with 100. I know even Hoop, when I first talked to him about it, he was a little intimidated. He can talk more about that when it gets to him in this, but don't be intimidated. Like, get in the dollar tournament, run 150 teams. And you know what? I promise you, you're not going to do it without some failures. There's going to be some slate where you mess it up and you get some dude in there that you didn't want in there. You don't upload it in time and something gets messed up. That's why you practice. Like anything in life, you got to practice to get better at it. I sucked at it at first. I was terrible, getting help from anyone that I could. Back at our other company we worked at, I was just begging for help from people because I didn't know how to do it. I was a 1 to 3 lineup guy. You see everyone win all this money using an optimizer. And instead of being the people on Twitter like, oh, anyone can win with 150, anyone can do this, what did I do? I said, I want to be the one that people are complaining about because I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it, which is the truth for anybody out there. If we can do it, you can do it. We're not freaking brain surgeons. We play fantasy and know sports. We're not the 3 sharpest dudes in the freaking world with stuff, but we know how to learn. We know how to use the numbers. We know how to have a very talented team at Run Pure that helps us in a lot of areas. And I don't think personally, I've said this for the last year or so, I don't think you can be top level DFS without some sort of optimizer use. And that doesn't mean you have to play 150 teams. That's not what I'm saying. You have to be able to use an optimizer to run the sims or projections or whatever you want to give you a base, even for one team. If you're playing on one team, I still think you need to use some sort of optimization or you're going to get swallowed up and left behind. I can almost promise you.
Yeah, so many great things you said there. I'll comment on a couple just because a few stood out to me. One is a thing like salary left on the table. Like you said, we're not getting into what's your favorite number to leave on the table here, but the idea of when you're hand building, meaning you're just going into the app and building your lineup together, putting it, picking this guy, that guy. DraftKings literally, for example, on DK, it'll land you on the last dollar spot. And let's say it lands you on $7,700. Most people are, even some of you watching this, probably start debating which 7,700 guy do I end out with. But using an optimizer, when you say I can leave 49,000 as my min, 50 as my max, they may land you on a $6,700 guy in the optimizer that you would have never left it that way. And that can be the absolute difference maker for the week, because now not only do you have a unique build, but you managed to get on a guy where most just ended up in a range that maybe was a range that ended up being a dead range where all the guys missed the cuts or whatever it might be there. So that's one thing that you brought up. And then the other thing is you can use the optimizer in a couple different ways. One, you don't have to do 150, but to Big T's point, I think you should always be working on your game. So if you start off getting into this as a 1 or 3 entry lineup person, you could now use it for a try out the $1.20 max and just start playing around with $20 every week instead of the $20 Millie Maker or the pitch and putt, as they like to call it, the big prize pool. You could just start out with a $1.20 max and hone your game on that. And then the last point you made, I think was great, Big T, was more around use an optimizer in some way, shape, or form. I've talked about this in the past. It's not even a joke. It's true, but I call it virtual hand building. And if I'm picking lineups for I'll put 150 and say the $20, but in the 555, I'm not putting the full 28 lineups you're allowed to put in. I might put 2 or 3, some weeks, maybe 4 or 5 if I'm feeling lucky. Maybe that's how I go about it. But I use the optimizer with my pool to see what are some of those lineups that look good. I like the guys in them because it's my pool and they look unique enough to be able to take down what quote unquote everybody else is doing this week going into the tournament. So I love using it for that. And then just lastly, Hoop, before I go to your final thoughts on the optimizer, just the cores and the tier plays. We just talked about it. If you don't have time, you could literally go into SaberSim, lock Big T's 3-person core in the optimizer and say build 20 lineups with at least 3 uniques, and see if you can get that where they'll put 3 other unique guys in every single lineup you build to go with Big T's core, up to as many as they can. When you do it that way, usually you can get at least the 20, if not more, and you'll be able to have plenty of different lineups that you can go through and put into the tournament. So another great reason to have that. Another great reason when you sign up at Run Pure Sports to add on that SaberSim package. And you may hear things on shows like this week, nobody's going to lock 2 studs. Well, lock your 2 favorite studs, boom, spit it out and see what that looks like. And you've got a lot of good opportunity there to find yourself different ways to get to the top of the leaderboard. Hoop, I'll go over to you. Just some of your final thoughts on the optimizer before we get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a great person to kind of talk about this in terms of someone that's hesitant to get into using an optimizer. Me and Big T, been very close for a while. I feel like I'm one of those people that he was talking about that was very hesitant to use it. I, at one point, and this is no exaggeration, hand-built 150 lineups for a PGA DFS major. The results were actually pretty good, but I will tell you, I'll never do that again after becoming comfortable with an optimizer. 2 things if you want to get into, building lineups via an optimizer. Number 1, ask questions. I mean, ask as many questions as you can. Our Discord at Run Pure Sports is the perfect spot for that. Not only do we have all our coordinators in there, we have tons and tons of members that are on there 24/7 answering questions. We have a channel dedicated to our optimizer and asking questions. Number 1, ask questions. Number 2, like Tony said, trial and error. Don't go in day 1 of using an optimizer and say, I'm going to build 150 teams. I'm going to put it in the Millie Maker this week. I'm all in. No, play the smaller ones. Play around with it. Like, you need to do some trial and error. Don't just go all in. Ask questions, trial and error, the 2 most important things if you're new to an optimizer. The next thing I wanted to bring up was different ways that you can use an optimizer. A lot of people think, okay, someone's using an optimizer, it's for 150 teams. That's how you do it, max. No, you can do it for 20 teams, 20 max. I know, for MMA, Title does all his content, 20 max. You can do 20 max optimization. Sometimes I'm building 10 teams and I use an optimizer. Some teams I go down to 5 teams and I know I want 20% of this guy, 40% of that guy. You can do it for 5 teams. So many different ways that an optimizer is very valuable. Like Tony said, he wouldn't have won that Millie Maker if he didn't use an optimizer, because there's no way he's going to end his team with $900 left on the table. That team had $49,100, probably would have upgraded his cheapest guy to somebody else. So many different ways that an optimizer is valuable. We have the partnership with SaberSim. They make it very, very easy for new users to get involved into lineup optimization. And I think we all highly recommend some level of, using a lineup optimizer to build your teams. A lot of things you can miss if you don't. It's a very important aspect of DFS, way different than in the past. Like now, these big prize pools all across the industry, you most likely put 150 teams in. If you're not using an optimizer, you're behind the ball with the competition for sure.
I agree. Big T, any final thoughts? We talked through a lot of stuff here today. Hopefully this was helpful. Went through a lot of categories for the people, trying to get through as much as possible. Like you said, a lot of it is week to week over at Run Pure Sports, where you guys can find this stuff out. What are the secrets to that slate, specifically that tournament each week in PGA DFS? But any final thoughts from you before we get out of here for PGA DFS?
No, I mean, just to sum up the optimizer too. I mean, I think people would be stunned sometimes. I like doing this for football and golf, especially. Build a bunch of teams where you just set it to leave like between 500 and 900 left over with your numbers. And it's crazy, some of the teams, how good they look, even though you're leaving that much salary on the table. You're really picking up edge though, because you're not going to have as many duplicates. You're not going to have a lot of the negatives about spending all the salary like Tambo was talking about, where all the hand builders just go, if they got a 6,900 guy and they got 700 left, they're going to go up to the 7,600 range and try to find a guy. Whereas the 6,900 guys aren't that different, and you're getting so much more unique, which is very important that we can talk about in a different strategy piece on these videos. But yeah, I think we covered it all very good. And I think at Run Pure Sports, I know at Run Pure Sports, we'll have you covered. It's not going to be something that you don't have to put any effort into unless, I mean, you can do that, get the plays and do it. But to get the most out of our product, if you put full effort in and actually read the content, watch the shows, play with the optimizer at SaberSim, do all that stuff, I can almost promise you're going to be more successful. That doesn't mean you're going to win $1 million. Doesn't mean you're going to do this for a living, stuff like that. But I promise you're going to see the reward of it, no matter what that reward is. And I'm very confident in what we put out there on a daily and weekly basis.
Yeah, love that you brought that up. The members too. We talked about all the winning we've been doing and other contributors, but we've had two guys over the last month and a half of the time of recording this video win over 200K, one off of just $146 in buy-ins. And then one more recently, the week that you had the 145K week, Big T, we had Birdie Monster, another member of ours, go out and win first for 200,000. On top of that, like another 75K across other tournaments where he had that lineup. So a lot of good stuff going on there. Hoop, any final thoughts from you before I get us out of here?
Yeah, I mean, just, basic breakdown here of, DFS, PGA DFS in general, a sport that we've had a lot of success in. And when we built Run Pure Sports, I think Tony can attest to this, like PGA, was a sport that we were all interested in, but I think the passion and our team that we've built behind our PGA product has really pushed this to the forefront of things that we're trying to do. We have Showdown content as well, rounds 2, 3, 4, and even the first round. So PGA DFS has really become a priority for us at Run Pure Sports. We're going to continue to grow the product and grow the team and, continue to be at the top of the leaderboard week in and week out.
Yeah, that's the plan. And hopefully we can help you guys do the same. That's going to do it for this edition of Trust the Process, our PGA edition. You guys can do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. Like I talked about, big red button down in the corner. You'll get notifications of all our other free content. And when you're ready to hop in and take the next step and jump into runpuresports.com premium content, please do so. Check us out there. As soon as you sign up, hop into the Discord. We'll answer any questions that you guys have. For Hoop, for Big T, I'm Toe Tag and Tambo. Simon, get us out of here.